Wealthy CEO rejects his pregnant wife, only to face her daughter 20 years later as rival CEO. Hi viewers, don't scroll past this. Your heart led you here for a reason. Beautiful souls, I'm Mr. Daniel, and this isn't just a channel, it's your family. Today's story might be exactly what your soul needed to hear. If you feel the calling, comment, "I'm ready, Mr. Daniel," and let's begin this journey together. Your one comment keeps our family's heartbeat alive. Don't just watch. Become part of something greater. He had spent 20 years burying his sins, until the day his past walked through the conference room doors wearing a white suit and a smile that could end empires. The Atlanta skyline stretched beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows like a kingdom slipping through his fingers. 47 floors above the city his family had shaped for 3 generations. Marcus Whitfield sat in silence. Dawn had not fully broken, but he had not slept anyway. The weight of 18 months of losses pressed against his chest like a hand he could not see. On his desk, 7 folders sat in a neat row. 7 projects. 7 losses. Every single one snatched away by the same company, Monarch Holdings. A name that had become a curse in these hallways. A name that made his investors nervous and his board members whisper about replacement when they thought he could not hear. Marcus poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey, even though the sun was barely up. The bottle was nearly empty. It had been full on Monday. His phone buzzed. Another missed call from his son Julian, the 3rd this week. Marcus let it ring through to voicemail. Just like he had let every call from both his sons go unanswered for the past 6 months. What would he say to them? That their father was failing? That the empire they were supposed to inherit was crumbling while he watched? 2 marriages. Both ended in courtrooms and silence. 2 sons who stopped trying to reach him. A board that looked at him now with pity instead of respect. Marcus Whitfield had everything on paper and nothing that mattered. Have you ever had your past show up when you least expected it? That moment when everything you buried comes back to collect what you owe? Tell me in the comments. What would you do if you could not run anymore? His assistant knocked twice before entering. "Mr. Whitfield, I have news." Marcus did not turn from the window. "Unless Monarch Holdings has gone bankrupt overnight." "I do not want to hear it." "Actually, sir, they have agreed to a meeting. Today, 2 o'clock. They want to discuss a potential merger." Marcus spun around. For the first time in months, something like hope flickered in his chest. A merger. That meant negotiation. That meant a chance to save everything. "Who is coming? Their CEO?" "Yes, sir. Someone named Zora Carter. I could not find much about her online. She keeps a low profile." Marcus nodded slowly. Zora Carter. He had heard the name but never seen a photograph. Some said she was a ghost, a faceless force behind the company that was eating his legacy alive. Others said she was just a front for bigger investors, a puppet with a title. Either way, Marcus knew how to handle businessmen. He had been doing it since he was 25. Whoever this Zora Carter worked for, whoever really pulled the strings, Marcus would find out. He would charm them or intimidate them or outmaneuver them. That was what Whitfields did. He spent the morning preparing, reviewing numbers, practicing speeches in the mirror, adjusting his tie until it sat perfectly. By the time 2 o'clock arrived, Marcus felt something he had not felt in months. Control. He took his seat at the head of the mahogany conference table. His remaining board members filled the chairs around him, nervous but trying to hide it. The clock on the wall ticked toward the hour. The doors opened. Marcus expected a team of lawyers. He expected gray suits and briefcases and the cold handshakes of men who traded companies like playing cards. Instead, A young black woman walked in alone. She wore a white suit that fit her like armor. Her natural hair was pulled back from her face, and she moved through the room like weather, inevitable, impossible to ignore. Behind her came a tall man in a navy suit, who watched the room with sharp eyes. But Marcus barely noticed him, because Marcus could not stop staring at her. She was young, too young, 20, maybe 21 at most. But she carried herself like someone who had already won every fight she had ever entered. Her eyes swept the room, assessing, calculating, dismissing. And then they landed on Marcus. And something in his chest went cold. Those eyes. He knew those eyes. She extended her hand with the confidence of someone who had already won. "Zora Carter," she said, "CEO of Monarch Holdings." Marcus shook her hand automatically, his mind racing. Where had he seen those eyes before? Why did her face make his pulse stutter and his palms sweat? "Mr. Whitfield," she continued, taking a seat across from him, "I have been looking forward to this meeting. I have heard so much about you." Her voice was calm, professional. But underneath, Marcus heard something else, something that sounded almost like contempt. And then it hit him. 20 years ago. A different face, a different name, but the same eyes, the same tilt of the chin, the same quiet fire burning behind a controlled expression. Denise. Denise Carter. The woman he had loved. The woman he had abandoned. The woman whose pregnancy had terrified him so completely that he had let his mother pay her to disappear. This girl, this woman, this CEO who had spent 18 months systematically destroying everything his family had built. She had Denise's eyes. The glass in Marcus's hand trembled. He set it down before anyone could notice. It was impossible. It had to be impossible. Denise had taken the money and vanished. She had signed papers promising never to contact him again. She had been erased from his life so completely that some mornings he could almost convince himself she had never existed at all. But those eyes were looking at him right now like he was prey. And when Marcus looked into them, the glass nearly slipped from his fingers. Because he had seen those eyes before. 20 years ago. In the face of the woman he destroyed. She walked into that room to bury a corporation. She had no idea she was about to bury her own father. Zora Carter had waited 18 months for this moment. 18 months of outbidding, outmaneuvering, and outlasting the great Whitfield enterprises. 18 months of watching their stock price drop while her own company soared. 18 months of preparation for the day she would finally sit across from the man at the top and watch him realize he had already lost. She had expected him to be arrogant. She had expected tailored suits and rehearsed smiles and the kind of confidence that came from never having to earn anything. She had expected to hate him on sight. What she had not expected was the way he looked at her. Marcus Whitfield stared at her like he had seen a ghost. His face went pale, then flushed, then pale again. His hands gripped the arms of his chair like he might fall out of it. And his eyes kept searching her face, moving from feature to feature like he was trying to solve a puzzle. It threw her off balance, but only for a second. "Mr. Whitfield," Zora said, sliding a folder across the table toward him. "Inside you will find our proposal for the acquisition of Whitfield Enterprises. I suggest you review it carefully." Acquisition? One of the board members, a heavy man with sweat on his forehead, leaned forward. "We were told this was a merger discussion." Zora smiled. It was not a warm smile. "I find it saves time to be honest about intentions. Monarch Holdings is not interested in a partnership. We are interested in purchasing your company. The terms are generous, given your current financial situation. She laid out the numbers with precision. Revenue projections, market analysis, a detailed accounting of every project Whitfield had lost to Monarch in the past year and a half. She watched the board members shift in their seats, watched their eyes dart to Marcus, watched them realize what she had known for months. Whitfield Enterprises was dying, and she was holding the shovel. What would it feel like to face someone who holds your future in their hands and not know they are connected to your blood? Drop a comment. Have you ever been in a room with someone and felt something you could not explain? Throughout her presentation, Marcus said nothing. He just watched her. That strange, searching stare that made her skin prickle with discomfort she refused to show. I built Monarch Holdings from nothing, Zora said, closing her folder. I started when I was 19 years old with a small loan and a lot of sleepless nights. I did not have family connections or inherited wealth. I did not have anyone handing me opportunities on a silver platter. She let the words hang in the air. Let them settle over Marcus Whitfield like an accusation. You have 72 hours to accept our terms, she continued. After that, we proceed with a hostile takeover. Your shareholders are already nervous. Your stock is already falling. I do not think you want to see what happens when we stop being polite. Zora stood. Beside her, Elijah rose as well, his hand brushing the small of her back in a gesture so familiar she barely noticed it anymore. They had been partners, business partners, for 3 years now. He was the only person in the world who knew every detail of her plans, her fears, her ambitions. And he was the only person whose opinion she truly trusted. As she moved toward the door, Marcus's voice stopped her. Ms. Carter. Zora paused, turning back. He was still seated, still gripping that chair like it was the only thing holding him upright. Your mother, he said. What is her name? The question landed strangely. Zora frowned. Why do you ask? The name sounded familiar. Carter. I knew someone with that name once. Something flickered across his face, something that looked almost like pain. But Zora pushed the observation aside. She did not have time for this man's games. Her name is Denise, Zora said. Denise Carter. She raised me alone in Chicago after my father abandoned us before I was born. She watched his reaction carefully. The way his jaw tightened. The way his knuckles went white against the armrest. The way he swallowed hard before forcing a smile that looked like broken glass. I see, he said. Just curious. The name sounded familiar. Zora did not believe him, but she did not care enough to press. 72 hours, Mr. Whitfield, she said. I suggest you use them wisely. And then she walked out, leaving him alone with his crumbling empire and a silence that felt heavier than any words. Behind her, she did not see Marcus grip the conference table so hard his knuckles turned white. She did not see him press his eyes closed like a man trying to wake from a nightmare. She did not hear the single word he whispered into the empty room after everyone else had gone. Denise. But Elijah saw. Elijah, who missed nothing, who had watched Marcus Whitfield with sharp eyes throughout the entire meeting, who had sensed something unspoken crackling in the air between the old CEO and the young one. Elijah saw. And Elijah began to wonder. 20 years ago, he promised her forever in a Savannah courtyard. 20 years later, forever came back with interest. And it was collecting. Marcus did not go home after the meeting. He could not face his empty penthouse, the silence that waited there, the thoughts that would catch up with him the moment he stopped moving. Instead, he drove. For hours, through Atlanta streets that held no memories, past buildings his family had constructed, under billboards advertising companies he had helped create. All of it meaningless now. All of it ash in his mouth. When he finally stopped, it was at a liquor store. He bought a bottle of wine, a specific bottle, a Savannah label he had not tasted in 20 years, and drove to the penthouse after all. The first sip broke something open inside him. Suddenly, he was 32 again. Suddenly, the Atlanta skyline was replaced by Spanish moss and crumbling fountains. Suddenly, he could smell jasmine on the warm Georgia air and feel Denise's hand in his as they walked through a Savannah courtyard that felt like it belonged only to them. Have you ever loved someone so completely that you became a different person with them? Someone braver, better, more alive? Share your story below, because love like that never really leaves us, does it? He met her at the law firm that handled his company's contracts. She was a paralegal, brilliant, beautiful, with a laugh that made him forget every boardroom and country club he had ever sat in. She looked at him like he was more than his last name, like he was someone worth choosing. They kept it secret at first. They had to. His family would never accept a black woman from Bankhead, no matter how smart, no matter how accomplished. His mother had plans for him, society weddings, strategic alliances, the kind of marriages that merged fortunes rather than hearts. But Marcus did not care about his mother's plans, not when he was with Denise. They stole weekends in Savannah, rented a cottage on the Gulf Coast of Alabama where nobody knew the Whitfield name, ate at hidden restaurants where the owners called them that young couple so in love, and brought them free dessert. In that Savannah courtyard, surrounded by history and jasmine and the ghosts of 100 hidden loves, Marcus told Denise he loved her for the first time. She cried. He held her, and he meant every word. The cottage on the Gulf Coast became their sanctuary. Marcus could still remember the weight of her head on his chest as they swayed to music playing from a cheap radio. The way moonlight came through sheer curtains and painted her skin silver. The way she traced the lines of his face like she was memorizing him for a lifetime. "I want forever with you," he whispered against her hair. "Then take it," she whispered back. "Forever is right here." He believed her. For those stolen months, he believed they could have everything. That love was stronger than legacy. That his family's expectations were just obstacles to overcome rather than walls he could never climb. He was wrong. The phone call came on a Tuesday. Denise's voice shaking with joy and fear and hope all tangled together. "I am pregnant." 3 words. 3 words that should have meant everything. 3 words that, in a better version of Marcus, would have made him drop to his knees and thank God for the gift. Instead, he felt his blood go cold. Instead, he thought about his mother, the inheritance, the life he had been groomed for since birth. Instead, he pulled away. "Are you sure?" His voice came out wrong, distant, already retreating. "I am sure." Denise's hand found her stomach, still flat, still holding a secret only they knew. "Marcus, we are going to be parents. We are going to be a family." He should have held her tighter. Should have chosen love over legacy right then and there. Should have told his mother and the whole world that Denise Carter was the woman he loved and their child was the future he wanted. But Marcus Whitfield was not brave enough. He had never been brave enough. "I need time to think," he said. And Denise's face, her beautiful, hopeful, trusting face, began to crack. Marcus sat in his penthouse now, 20 years later, the wine bottle empty on the table beside him. He could still see her expression when she realized he was not going to fight for them. Still feel the moment her hand slipped out of his. He chose wrong. He chose the inheritance and the empire and the mother who controlled everything. And now the bill had arrived, wearing a white suit, speaking in corporate terms, looking at him with Denise's eyes, his daughter, the child he paid $200,000 to pretend did not exist. Though Denise had never cashed the check, she had kept her dignity. He had kept nothing. She raised a queen from the ruins of a broken promise, and she did it without ever speaking his name. 1,000 miles away, in a brownstone in Chicago's Hyde Park neighborhood, Denise Carter stood at her kitchen window and watched the evening light fade over the city. The phone call from Zora had ended an hour ago, but her hand still trembled. Whitfield Enterprises. She had known this day would come, eventually. Had known, somewhere deep in her bones, that Atlanta would call her daughter back. That the past she had buried so carefully would claw its way to the surface. She just had not expected it to happen like this. Mothers carry secrets to protect us from truths we are not ready to hold. Have you ever discovered something your mother kept hidden? Something that changed how you saw your own story? Tell me in the comments. Denise was 50 now. The years had added silver to her hair and lines around her eyes. But they had also given her something far more valuable: peace. She had built a consulting firm from nothing, raised a daughter alone, created a life that did not depend on anyone else's approval or permission. She had survived Marcus Whitfield. But surviving was not the same as forgetting. The memory came whether she wanted it or not. 20 years ago. A certified letter arriving at her apartment in Atlanta, the one she had rented with dreams of decorating a nursery in the spare room. The letter was from Marcus's lawyers. Cold, clinical. 3 pages of legal terms that boiled down to a simple transaction. $200,000 in exchange for her signature on papers, promising she would never contact Marcus Whitfield again, never reveal the identity of her child's father, never make any claim to the Whitfield name or fortune. $200,000. That was the price he had put on their love, on their child, on her. Denise remembered staring at that letter until the words blurred. Remembered the fury that rose in her chest, hot and righteous and unlike anything she had ever felt. Remembered picking up a pen, ready to sign, ready to take the money and use it to give her baby a good life. And then she stopped. She looked at the check attached to the letter. All those zeros. Enough to solve every problem she faced. Enough to make the struggle easier. But it was also proof. Proof that she could be bought. Proof that Marcus Whitfield was right to throw her away, because she would take the money and disappear like he expected. Denise tore the check in half, then she tore it again and again, until the pieces were too small to put back together. She kept the papers, though. Kept them in a locked box as proof not of his love, but of his lie. Evidence that she had been worth something to him once, even if that something was only fear. 3 days later, she packed everything she owned into a second-hand car and drove to Chicago. She never looked back. "You seem far away tonight." Harold's voice pulled her back to the present. He stood in the kitchen doorway, concern softening his features. He was 62, a retired professor with kind eyes and patient hands and the rare gift of knowing when to ask questions and when to simply be present. He had loved Denise for 5 years. In all that time, he had never asked about Zora's father, never pressed for details she was not ready to give. He simply loved her, wholly, steadily, without conditions. "Zora called," Denise said. She is in Atlanta, negotiating a deal with a company there. And that troubles you? Denise turned from the window. Harold's eyes held no judgment, only the quiet concern of a man who had learned to read her silences. The company is Whitfield Enterprises, she said. Harold's eyebrows rose slightly. He knew that name. Denise had mentioned it once, years ago, when the wine had loosened her tongue and the night had felt safe enough for confession. She had not given details, just the shape of a wound, the outline of a betrayal. But Harold had remembered. "Ah," he said softly. "I see." He crossed the kitchen and wrapped his arms around her. Denise leaned into him, letting his warmth anchor her. This was what healthy love felt like, she thought. Quiet, stable. Without the dramatic highs and devastating lows that had marked her time with Marcus. She had learned the hard way that fire burned. After Harold fell asleep, Denise crept to her closet. The locked box sat on the top shelf behind winter sweaters she never wore. She had not opened it in 10 years, had almost convinced herself she had forgotten what it contained. But her fingers remembered the combination. The lock clicked open, and Denise lifted the lid. Inside, papers. The torn pieces of that check, kept like evidence. Legal documents she had never signed. And a photograph. Her and Marcus in Savannah. Both of them smiling, her hand resting on a stomach that was just beginning to show. His arm around her shoulders, pulling her close like he would never let go. On the back, in his handwriting, "Our forever starts now." Denise stared at the words until they blurred. She had kept this photograph as proof, not of his love, but of his lie. A reminder that pretty words meant nothing without the courage to back them up. And now she wondered if the time had finally come to let her daughter see the face of the man who did not choose them. She came to Atlanta to take his company. She did not expect the city itself to feel like a haunting. Memories she had never lived pressing against her skin. The Ritz-Carlton suite should have felt like a victory. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city Zora was about to conquer. A king-sized bed she would barely use because sleep was a luxury she had never learned to afford. Fresh flowers on every surface, champagne chilling in a silver bucket. The quiet hum of wealth and power humming through every square inch of space. But something felt wrong. Have you ever walked into a place for the first time and felt like it already knew you? Like the air held secrets that belonged to you? Share your experience below. Sometimes our bodies remember what our minds never knew. Zora stood on her balcony, watching Atlanta glitter beneath her. The city her mother had fled 20 years ago. The city where her father, whoever he was, had made the choice that shaped everything Zora had become. She did not think about her father often. What was the point? He was a ghost, a blank space, a coward who had chosen money over love. Her mother had told her that much when Zora was old enough to ask questions. He was weak, baby. He let his family's money matter more than we did. That was all Denise ever said. No name, no details. Just the shape of an absence Zora had learned to fill with ambition and achievement. But being in Atlanta stirred something she could not name. A restlessness. A feeling of standing close to something important without being able to see it. Her phone buzzed. Elijah. "You should be sleeping," his voice said when she answered. "So should you. Cannot sleep when you are awake. You know that." Despite everything, Zora smiled. Elijah Monroe, her attorney, her partner, her closest friend. He had been with her since the beginning, since she was a 19-year-old with a business plan and a determination that scared most people away. He had believed in her before anyone else did. And somewhere along the way, belief had become something deeper, something neither of them talked about. "Come have a drink with me," Zora said. "I cannot shut my brain off." 20 minutes later, they sat on her balcony, whiskey between them, the city spread out like a map of possibility. Elijah watched her with those careful eyes that missed nothing. "The meeting rattled you," he said. It was not a question. "He was strange," Zora admitted. "Whitfield. He kept looking at me like he knew me, like he was searching for something in my face. Rich old men are always strange. They are not used to being outmaneuvered by someone younger and smarter. Maybe." But the explanation did not satisfy her. Elijah shifted closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, the solid presence that had anchored her through every crisis of the past 3 years. His hand found hers on the armrest. "Whatever he is hiding," Elijah said, "we will find it, and we will use it." Zora turned to face him. The city lights caught his profile, the strong jaw, the thoughtful eyes, the mouth that she had imagined kissing more times than she would ever admit. He leaned toward her. Time slowed, the space between them charged with electricity. And then he pulled back. "We should get some sleep," he said, his voice rough. "Big day tomorrow." Zora nodded, disappointment and relief tangled together in her chest. They could not complicate things. Not now. Not when everything she had worked for was finally within reach. But as Elijah left, his hand brushed her shoulder, and Zora felt the touch burn through her like a promise of something more. The next evening, she found herself at a bar near the hotel. She needed to clear her head, to think about something other than business and buried feelings and the strange way Marcus Whitfield had looked at her. The bar was upscale but not pretentious. Dark wood, low lighting, the kind of place where deals were made and secrets were kept. Zora took a seat at the end of the counter and ordered whiskey, neat. "Rough day?" She turned. A man had taken the seat beside her, late 20s, handsome, with the kind of polished look that came from money. But his eyes were tired and his tie was loosened, and he carried himself like someone who had stopped caring about appearances. "Something like that," Zora said. "I will drink to that." He raised his glass. "Julian." "Zora." They clinked glasses. One drink became two, two became three. And somewhere between the alcohol and the late hour, Julian started talking about his family. "My father is a piece of work," he said, swirling his whiskey. "Built an empire and forgot he had children in the process. Both marriages failed, both sons estranged, but he still thinks legacy is everything." "Sounds familiar," Zora said carefully. "Whitfield Enterprises." Julian laughed bitterly. "You have probably heard of it. Everyone in Atlanta has. The great Marcus Whitfield, master of real estate, failure at everything else." Zora's heart stuttered. Julian Whitfield. She was sitting next to Marcus Whitfield's son. She should leave, should walk away before things got complicated. But curiosity held her in place. "What happened?" she asked. "Between you and your father?" Julian stared into his glass. "He was never really present, you know? Always working, always chasing the next deal. My mother, his first wife, she told me once that he was already broken when she married him. Said there was a woman before her. Someone he really loved, someone his family paid to disappear." Zora's blood went cold. "What happened to her?" "Who knows?" Julian shrugged. "My grandmother took care of it, made her go away. But sometimes I wonder if she had his kid, you know? If I have a sibling somewhere who got lucky enough to grow up without the Whitfield name." The room tilted. Zora gripped the edge of the bar to steady herself. Her mother had been a paralegal in Atlanta before Zora was born, before she moved to Chicago, before she stopped answering questions about Zora's father. Coincidence? It had to be coincidence. "I should go," Zora said abruptly, throwing bills on the counter. "Early morning." Julian looked confused but nodded. "Nice meeting you, Zora. Maybe I will see you around." She walked back to her hotel through the humid Georgia night, Julian's words echoing in her skull. A woman his family paid to disappear. A sibling who got lucky enough to grow up without the Whitfield name. It was impossible. It had to be impossible. But as Zora rode the elevator to her floor, she could not shake the feeling that she was standing on the edge of something that would change everything. He had 72 hours to save his company. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw his daughter's face, and the deadline stopped mattering. Marcus did not sleep that night, or the night after. The image of Zora Carter burned behind his eyelids every time he tried to rest. Those eyes, Denise's eyes, looking at him across that conference table with the cold precision of someone preparing to destroy everything he had built. His daughter. The words felt impossible, foreign, like a language he had forgotten how to speak. By the second morning, Marcus had made a decision. He needed to know for certain. He needed proof that what his gut was screaming was actually true. He called a private investigator, someone discreet, someone expensive, someone who could deliver answers within hours instead of days. "Zora Carter," Marcus said into the phone. "Born sometime in early 2004. Mother's name is Denise Carter. I need everything. Birth certificate, school records, everything you can find." The investigator did not ask why. That was what the money was for. Have you ever held on to something from a past relationship, a photo, a message, a memory you could not let go? What did it represent? Tell me in the comments what you kept and why. While he waited, Marcus did something he had not done in years. He went to his bedroom safe, not the one in his office where he kept business documents, but the personal one hidden behind a painting his second wife had hated. Inside sat an old phone, a flip phone from another era, outdated and useless except for one thing, the photos stored in its memory. Marcus powered it on. The battery was nearly dead, but it held enough charge for him to scroll through the images he had never been able to delete. Denise laughing on the beach in Alabama, sand in her hair, sun on her skin. Looking at the camera like the person holding it was the center of her universe. Denise asleep in their Savannah cottage, sheets tangled around her, morning light painting her in gold. Denise looking up at him with those eyes, those same eyes Zora had inherited, full of trust and love, and a future they would never share. Marcus's throat tightened. He had kept these photos for 20 years, through 2 marriages, through every success and failure. Through all the nights when whiskey could not quiet the voice in his head that whispered he had made the worst mistake of his life. He had told himself he kept them as a reminder, a warning, proof that sentiment was weakness and that choosing legacy over love had been the right decision. But sitting here now, scrolling through the face of the woman he had thrown away, Marcus knew the truth. He had kept them because he could not let go. Because some part of him, the part he had buried under ambition and arrogance and 3 decades of pretending, had never stopped loving her. The investigator's report arrived at noon. A folder delivered by courier, thick with documents Marcus was almost afraid to open. The private investigator's folder sat on his desk like a bomb with a slow fuse. Inside, a birth certificate, school records, newspaper clippings about a young black woman who built a real estate empire before she could legally drink. His daughter. His blood. The child he paid $200,000 to pretend did not exist. Though Denise had never cashed the check. She had kept her dignity. He had kept nothing. Zora Carter, born February 14, 2004. Chicago, Illinois. Mother, Denise Carter. Father, unlisted. February 2004, 9 months after that summer in Savannah. 9 months after Denise told him she was pregnant and he pulled away instead of pulling her closer. The timeline was undeniable. Marcus read through the newspaper clippings, business profiles, magazine features. A young woman who had started her company at 19 with nothing but determination and a chip on her shoulder. Who had built Monarch Holdings into a force that now threatened to swallow his family's legacy whole. His daughter had become everything he had failed to be. Self-made, principled, unafraid. And she was about to destroy him. The board meeting that afternoon was a blur. Faces around the table. Voices demanding he accept Monarch's terms. Threats of resignation. Warnings about stock prices and investor confidence, and everything Marcus had spent his entire life caring about. He barely heard any of it. Marcus. His CFO's voice cut through the fog. Are you listening? We have 48 hours left. If you do not make a decision, I heard you, Marcus said. But his mind was elsewhere, on a photograph in a folder, on eyes that looked at him with contempt, on the daughter he had abandoned, who was now coming to collect what he owed. At 3 a.m, Marcus finally dialed. His fingers trembled over the numbers he had memorized 20 years ago and never forgotten. The phone rang once, twice, then a voice he had not heard in 2 decades. Older now, but unmistakable. I wondered how long it would take you to call. Denise had been waiting, and her voice held no forgiveness. 20 years of silence ended with a phone call at 3 a.m, and every word between them was a wound that had never healed. Marcus gripped the phone like a lifeline. His mouth had gone dry. All the words he had rehearsed over the years, the apologies, the explanations, the excuses, vanished the moment he heard her voice. Denise, he managed. Marcus. Her tone was flat, controlled, the voice of a woman who had spent 2 decades processing exactly this moment. I assume you met her? She walked into my conference room. She is trying to buy my company. A pause, then something that might have been a laugh if it had contained any warmth. That sounds like her. She has always gone after what she wants. She has your eyes. The words came out before Marcus could stop them. I knew. The moment I saw her, I knew. And yet you said nothing. The accusation landed like a blow. Because she was right. He had sat in that conference room, looked into his daughter's face, and chosen silence. Just like he had chosen silence 20 years ago. Some conversations change everything. Have you ever had a call that brought back years of feelings in seconds? A voice that transported you to another version of yourself? Share that moment in the comments. Why did you never tell her? Marcus asked. About me? Her voice came through the phone like weather from another lifetime, familiar yet changed, carrying warmth that was no longer for him. Because she deserved better than to grow up in your shadow. She deserved to become whoever she wanted to be without carrying the weight of a father who did not want her. I wanted her. The words tasted like ash. I wanted both of you. No, Marcus. You wanted us in theory. You wanted the idea of us. But when it came time to choose, you chose your mother's approval and your family's money. You do not get to rewrite that now. She was right. He knew she was right. But hearing it spoken aloud, in her voice, after all these years, it broke something inside him that had been cracked for decades. "I need to explain to her," he said. "I need her to understand." "Understand what?" "That you were a coward. She already knows that. I told her that much. What she does not know is your name, your face, the specifics of how you threw us away." Marcus pressed the phone against his ear as if he could get closer to her through the static, through the years, through the choices that had made them strangers. But some distances cannot be closed. Some bridges burn so completely that not even ashes remain. "Let me tell her," he begged. "Let me try to make it right." "You cannot make this right, Marcus. You can only tell the truth and accept whatever she decides to do with it." Denise's voice hardened. "And if you tell her everything. The letter, the money, the choice you made. She deserves the full truth or none of it." Silence stretched between them. 20 years of it, compressed into a single held breath. "She has your stubbornness," Denise said, her voice softening just slightly. "A crack in the armor. Your ambition, your refusal to lose." "Denise." "Goodbye, Marcus." The line went dead. Marcus sat in the silence that followed, her words echoing through the empty penthouse. His daughter had inherited his fire, his determination, his ruthlessness. And now that fire was pointed directly at him. The question was no longer whether he would lose his company. The question was whether he could survive losing her twice, once by choice and once by her own hand. 1,000 miles away, in a Chicago brownstone, Denise set down her phone and sat motionless in the dark. Beside her, Harold stirred. "Who was that?" he asked, his voice thick with sleep. "A ghost," Denise said softly. "Just a ghost." Harold did not press. He simply wrapped his arm around her and pulled her close, offering warmth without questions. This was what healthy love looked like. Quiet, patient, present. But as Denise lay in the darkness, she could not stop her mind from traveling back. To Savannah, to summer, to the man who had promised her forever and delivered nothing. She had moved on. She had built a life. She had raised a daughter who was stronger and braver than either of her parents had ever been. But some wounds never fully close. They just learn to stay quiet. She told herself it was business. She told herself he was just another obstacle. But every time Julian Whitfield walked into a room, Zora felt something shift that had nothing to do with strategy. The text arrived the morning after their bar conversation. Julian apologizing for drinking too much. Julian offering to buy her coffee as amends. Julian being charming and self-deprecating in a way that made Zora smile despite herself. She should have ignored it, should have deleted the message and focused on the work that had brought her to Atlanta. Instead, she texted back, "Coffee sounds good. Name the place." Have you ever been drawn to someone you knew you should stay away from? Someone who represented everything your head warned against, but your heart ignored? Tell me about the moment you realized you were in too deep. They met at a small cafe in Midtown, away from the business district, away from anyone who might recognize either of them. Julian looked different in daylight, less polished, more real. The bitterness from the bar had faded, replaced by something almost like hope when he saw her waiting at a corner table. "I was not sure you would come," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Neither was I." They sat across from each other in a coffee shop that smelled like roasted beans and poor decisions. Julian laughed at something she said, and Zora felt her strategy dissolve like sugar in hot water. He was supposed to be a source of information, a tool, a means to an end. But his eyes crinkled when he smiled, and his voice dropped when he leaned closer. And somewhere between her second espresso and his third apology, Zora realized she was in trouble. Julian talked about growing up Whitfield, the expectations, the coldness, a father who measured love in quarterly earnings and legacy preservation. He never came to my games, Julian said. Not one. Baseball, basketball, track. I tried everything, thinking maybe if I was good enough at something, he would show up. He never did. What about your mother? Which one? Julian laughed bitterly. The first one drank herself into a country club coma. The second one took half his money and moved to Palm Beach. Neither of them were what you would call present. Zora found herself leaning forward, listening, actually caring about the wounds this man carried, even though he was the son of the man she had come to destroy. That was the problem. She was starting to care. When they left the cafe, Julian's hand found the small of her back as he guided her through the crowded sidewalk. The touch was brief, innocent, but it sent electricity through her that she could not ignore. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. She should have said no. Should have walked away before things got any more complicated. "Same time tomorrow," she heard herself say. That night, Elijah was waiting in her hotel suite. His jaw was tight. His eyes were cold. He had seen her leaving the cafe with Julian, or someone had told him about it. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "Gathering information." "Is that what they call it now?" Elijah stepped closer, his voice dropping. "He is a Whitfield, Zora. His father is the man you came here to destroy. And you are having coffee dates with his son." "It is not a date." "Then what is it?" Zora did not have an answer, because she did not know anymore. The lines she had drawn so carefully were blurring, and she could not seem to stop it from happening. Elijah's reaction when Zora mentioned Julian, jaw tight, words clipped, a possessiveness he had no right to feel. But there it was anyway, written all over his face. "You are getting too close," he said, "to all of this. To him. Since when do you tell me what to do?" "Since I have been by your side for 3 years, watching you build something incredible. Since I have kept my distance because you said the work came first. Since I—" He stopped himself, swallowed hard. "Forget it." But the words he did not say hung in the air between them, heavy, charged, full of everything they had both been pretending not to feel. Zora stepped back. "We should get some sleep. Big day tomorrow?" Elijah nodded stiffly. "Right. The work. Always the work." He left without another word, and Zora stood alone in her suite, caught between two men who had no idea how tangled everything was about to become. The next afternoon, she met Julian again, and again the day after that. Their conversations grew longer, deeper, more personal. "Why do you hate your father so much?" Zora asked, genuinely curious. Julian's expression darkened. "Because he taught me that legacy matters more than love, that reputation matters more than people. He threw away the only woman he ever really loved because she did not fit the Whitfield image." Zora's coffee turned cold in her hands. "What happened to her?" Julian shrugged. "Grandmother paid her off. She disappeared. But sometimes I wonder if she ever had his child. If I have a sibling somewhere who got lucky enough to grow up without the Whitfield name." Zora could not breathe, could not think, could not move. Because Julian was not talking about a stranger. He was talking about her mother. The truth was right there, In Julian's eyes, in the shape of his jaw, in the way he tilted his head when he listened. Her brother. She had been falling for her own brother. Zora's hands trembled as she set down her coffee cup. The cafe noise faded to a distant hum. Julian was still talking. Something about his father, something about the past. But she could not hear the words anymore. All she could see was the shape of his face, the angle of his cheekbones, the way his eyebrows drew together when he was thinking. Features that looked nothing like hers. And yet. Zora? Julian leaned forward, concern crossing his face. Are you okay? You went pale? I have to go. She stood so abruptly her chair scraped against the floor. Work emergency. I am sorry. Wait. But she was already moving, out of the cafe, into the humid Atlanta air, walking fast, then faster, until she was practically running through streets that blurred around her. Imagine discovering that someone you were drawn to shares your blood, that the connection you felt was real, but not in the way you thought. How would you process that revelation? Share your thoughts below. Her hotel room, the door slamming behind her, the walls pressing inward as she paced, phone already in her hand, dialing the only person who could confirm what she feared. Her mother answered on the second ring. Zora? What is wrong? Marcus Whitfield? The name came out jagged, broken. Is he my father? Silence. The longest silence of Zora's life. How did you find out? Denise's voice was barely a whisper. So, it is true. Zora felt her legs give out. She sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at the wall without seeing it. He is my father. Marcus Whitfield is my father. Baby. And you never told me. 20 years. And you never told me. The hotel room walls pressed inward as Zora paced, her mother's voice in her ear confirming what her body already knew. Her father. Marcus Whitfield was her father. The man in the expensive suit who looked at her like he had seen a ghost. Because he had. He recognized her. He knew from the moment she walked into that conference room. And he said nothing. 20 years of absence, and when they finally stood face to face, he chose silence again. Denise tried to explain. The letter from his lawyers. The $200,000 offered to make her disappear. The choice to protect Zora from a man who valued money over his own child. But Zora could barely hear her. Her mind was spinning through the past week, reshaping every moment with this new information. The way Marcus had stared at her in the conference room. The question about her mother's name. The strange tension she had felt without understanding its source. He had known. He had looked at his own daughter and said nothing. And Julian. Oh God. Julian. The flutter she had felt. The attraction she had been fighting. The way she had leaned into his touch without thinking. Her brother. She had been developing feelings for her brother. Zora barely made it to the bathroom before she was sick. Hours passed. The sun set outside her window, painting the room in shades of orange and pink that felt obscene against the darkness inside her. A knock at the door. Zora? Elijah's voice. Worried. I know you're in there. Let me in. She did not have the strength to refuse. She opened the door, and he took one look at her face and stepped inside without a word. What happened? He asked. She could not tell him everything. Not about Julian. That shame was too fresh, too raw. But she told him the rest. Marcus Whitfield. Her father. The truth her mother had kept hidden for 20 years. Elijah listened. And when she was done talking, when the words had emptied out of her and left nothing but exhaustion behind, he simply opened his arms. She fell into them. He held her through the night, asking nothing, and for the first time she let herself be held without armor. his chest solid against her cheek, his hands steady on her back, his heartbeat a rhythm that anchored her when everything else was spinning out of control. "What are you going to do?" Elijah asked as dawn crept through the curtains. Zora stared at the ceiling. Her mother's words still rang in her ears. "He chose his family's money over us. He paid to make us disappear." She thought about walking away, letting Marcus Whitfield crumble on his own, letting karma do the work she had planned to do herself. But then she thought about her mother working 3 jobs to keep them fed, about growing up without a father while other kids had someone to cheer at their games, about the $200,000 Marcus Whitfield had thought was enough to erase a human life. "I am going to finish what I started," she said, her voice steady now. "But first, I am going to make him tell me the truth to my face. He owes me that much. He owes me everything." She requested a private meeting. He thought it was about the merger. He had no idea she was coming to collect a debt 20 years overdue. The message arrived on Marcus's phone at 9 in the morning. Simple. Direct. "I want to meet. Tonight. Your office. Just us." His heart nearly stopped. She knew. She had to know. Why else would she request a private meeting? Why else would she specify that they be alone? Marcus spent the day in a fog, canceling appointments, ignoring calls, rehearsing speeches that fell apart the moment he tried to string them together. What could he possibly say to her? What words existed for a man who had abandoned his child before she was even born? What would you say to the parent who abandoned you if you finally had them alone in a room with nowhere to run? What question would you need answered? Tell me in the comments, because Zora is about to ask everything. By 7 o'clock, the Whitfield Enterprises building had emptied. Only security remained, and Marcus sent them home too. Whatever was about to happen, he did not want witnesses. He sat in his corner office, the Atlanta skyline glittering beyond the windows, and waited. At exactly 8, the elevator doors opened. Zora walked in wearing the same white suit she had worn at their first meeting. Her face was calm, controlled, giving nothing away. But her eyes burned with something that made Marcus want to run and confess and beg for forgiveness all at the same time. His office after dark felt smaller than it had during business hours. The city lights beyond the windows offered no warmth, only witness. Zora sat across from him, and Marcus felt the walls closing in. "Ms. Carter," he began, "I assume you have questions about the merger?" "I am not here about the merger." Her voice was flat, dead, the voice of someone who had already made up their mind about who he was and what he deserved. "Then why? Tell me about Denise Carter." The name hit him like a physical blow. Marcus's carefully constructed composure cracked. "I do not know what you mean." "Yes, you do." Zora leaned forward. "You have known since the moment I walked into your conference room. I saw it in your face. You recognized something in me. You knew exactly who I was." Marcus said nothing, could say nothing. His throat had closed around words that refused to form. "I gave you a chance," Zora continued. "I gave you 3 days to come forward, to pick up the phone and tell me the truth. And you chose silence. Just like you chose silence 20 years ago." She reached into her bag and pulled out a photograph. Old, faded, creased from years of being handled and hidden and looked at in secret. Zora placed the photograph face down on the mahogany desk between them and waited. Marcus knew what it was before he turned it over. Knew because he had taken that photo himself in a savannah courtyard that smelled like jasmine and felt like forever. He flipped it over. Denise smiled up at him from 2 decades ago. Her hand rested on her stomach, the stomach that held his child, and on the back, in his own handwriting. Our forever starts now. I know who you are, Zora said, her voice flat. I know what you did. Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came. You wrote that, Zora continued. And then you paid $200,000 to make her disappear. To make me disappear. She leaned forward, and Marcus saw Denise's fire in her eyes, and his own ruthlessness. The combination was devastating. So here is what is going to happen, Zora said. You are going to tell me everything. Every detail, every excuse. Every reason you thought money was worth more than your own flesh and blood. Marcus's eyes burned. 20 years of suppressed guilt rose up like a flood. And then, Zora finished, you are going to watch me take every single thing that mattered to you more than we did. Starting with this company. She sat back, crossed her arms, waited. And Marcus Whitfield, who had spent his entire life controlling rooms and manipulating outcomes and never showing weakness, Marcus Whitfield began to cry. For 20 years, he rehearsed excuses in the dark. But when his daughter finally sat across from him demanding the truth, every lie dissolved. And all that remained was the man he had tried not to become. Marcus looked at his daughter across the desk. The photograph lay between them, evidence of a love he had destroyed and a life he had thrown away. Zora's eyes held no mercy, only the cold patience of someone who had waited her entire life for this moment. Start talking, she said. And Marcus did. Words fell from Marcus like debris from a collapsing building. 20 years of silence giving way to confession, each sentence heavier than the last. He watched his daughter's face as he spoke, searching for softening, finding only stillness. The city hummed 47 floors below, indifferent to the reckoning happening above. He told her about meeting Denise, the law firm, the first conversation that turned into lunch, then dinner, then something neither of them could stop. How being with her made him feel like a different person, braver, kinder, more real than he had ever been in his family's world of country clubs and calculated marriages. I loved her, Marcus said, his voice cracking. I need you to understand that. What we had was not a fling. It was not an affair. It was the only time in my life I knew exactly who I wanted to be. Can understanding someone's weakness ever be the first step toward forgiveness? Or does knowing why they hurt you only make the wound deeper? Tell me in the comments. Have you ever received an explanation that changed how you felt about a betrayal? He told her about his mother, Eleanor Whitfield, the matriarch who controlled everything, the family money, the business decisions, the acceptable boundaries of her son's life. How she discovered the relationship through a private investigator she had hired without Marcus's knowledge. How she appeared in his office one morning with photographs and an ultimatum. She gave me a choice, Marcus said. End things with Denise or lose everything. The company, the inheritance, the family name. She said she would make sure I never worked in real estate again, that she would destroy my reputation before she let me embarrass the family. Zora's expression did not change. And you chose the money. I chose fear. Marcus could barely look at her. I was 32 years old and still terrified of my mother, still convinced that her approval mattered more than my own happiness. I was a coward. There is no other word for it. He told her about the lawyers, the letter, the $200,000 his mother insisted would make the problem disappear. I did not write that letter, Marcus said. But I did not stop it either. I knew what they were doing, and I let them do it because it was easier than standing up and fighting for the woman I loved. Zora's hands tightened in her lap. Did you know she was pregnant when you sent it? The question hit Marcus like a blade. He closed his eyes. Yes. The single word hung in the air, heavy, damning. True. I knew, Marcus continued. She had told me a week before, and I was happy, for about 5 minutes. Then the fear took over. I started thinking about what my mother would say, what the family would do. How everything I had been raised to value would be destroyed if I chose Denise and our child over the Whitfield legacy. He opened his eyes and looked at his daughter. I am not telling you this to make excuses. There are no excuses for what I did. I am telling you because you asked for the truth and you deserve all of it. Marcus described falling in love with Denise, not as excuse, but as context. He recounted the night she told him about the pregnancy, how she glowed, how certain she was that they would build a life together, how her faith in him broke something inside him, because he knew he did not deserve it. She looked at me like I was brave, he said, and I spent 20 years proving her wrong. There was more. Details Zora did not know. Details that surprised even her. 5 years after she left, Marcus said, I tried to find her. I hired investigators, started gathering information. I was going to go to her, beg her to let me be part of your lives. Zora's eyes narrowed. What stopped you? My mother found out. She told me if I contacted Denise, she would make sure Denise's life became a living nightmare. Lawsuits, harassment. She would use every resource the family had to destroy the woman I loved. Marcus's voice broke. I believed her, so I stopped looking. I told myself it was to protect Denise. But the truth is, I was still too weak to fight. And when he finished, the silence that followed was louder than anything he had ever heard. Zora sat motionless for a long moment, processing, calculating, deciding. I do not expect forgiveness, Marcus said, his voice cracked. I do not deserve it. But I need you to know, not a day passed that I did not think about you, about who you might be, about whether you had my eyes or her smile. Zora stood slowly, the photograph still in her hand. I have her smile, she said, and your ambition. And apparently, your talent for walking away. She moved toward the door, then stopped. The merger meeting is in 48 hours. I will destroy everything you built, and you will watch. Consider it the inheritance you actually owe me. The door closed behind her, and Marcus Whitfield sat alone in the empire he had chosen over his child, finally understanding the cost. She came to Atlanta to bury a stranger. Now she carried the weight of knowing exactly who she was burying and why he deserved it. The hotel room was dark when Zora returned. She did not turn on the lights, did not change out of her suit, simply fell onto the bed and stared at the ceiling, her father's confession playing on repeat in her mind. He had loved her mother. He had been happy about the pregnancy, even if only for 5 minutes. He had tried to find them. None of it changed what he had done, but it complicated everything. She had spent 20 years hating a faceless monster, a cartoon villain who threw away his family because they were not worth keeping. That man was easy to destroy. Simple, clean. But Marcus Whitfield was not a monster. He was something worse. He was a coward, a weak man who knew the right thing to do and failed to do it. A man who chose comfort over courage again and again, until everyone who mattered was gone. Destroying a monster felt like justice. Destroying a broken man felt like something else entirely. Chicago felt impossibly far away as Zora lay on the hotel bed, phone pressed to her ear, listening to her mother's voice cross the distance. The room was dark except for the city lights bleeding through the curtains, painting shadows on the ceiling that looked like memories she had never lived. Her mother's breathing on the other end of the line was steady. It had always been steady, even when everything else was falling apart. "He told me everything," Zora said. "About you, about the letter, about why he did what he did." Denise was quiet for a moment. "And how do you feel?" "I do not know." Zora pressed her hand against her eyes. "I wanted to hate him. It was easier when I could just hate him. But now he is a person, not just an idea." "Yes. Have you ever loved someone even after they hurt you? Not forgiven them, but simply unable to stop the feeling? Share your truth below, because love does not always listen to logic." Mother and daughter talked for hours, about pain, about strength, about what it cost Denise to build a life from the rubble Marcus left behind. Denise revealed something Zora had never known. She kept the uncashed check from Marcus's lawyers all these years, framed in the back of her closet. "Why?" Zora asked. "As proof," Denise said. "Proof that I could not be bought, that my dignity was worth more than his money. Some days, when things got really hard, I would look at that check and remember who I chose to be." "Did you ever stop loving him?" Zora asked. The question she had been afraid to voice for 20 years. The line went quiet. Then Denise spoke, her voice thick with honesty. "No, baby, I never stopped. I stopped hoping. I stopped waiting. I stopped letting his memory control my choices. But the love?" She paused. "That never went away. It just learned to be quiet." Zora felt tears sliding down her temples and into her hair. "He made me feel chosen," Denise continued, "like I was the most important thing in his world. And then he made me feel like a problem to be solved. Both of those things can be true. Both of those things can hurt." Zora's phone buzzed. A text from Elijah. "Just checking on you. I'm here if you need me." She did not respond, but she read the message 3 times. "What did it cost you?" Zora asked her mother. "Raising me alone, building everything from nothing. What did it take from you?" The line went quiet. Then Denise spoke, her voice thick. "It cost me the version of myself who believed in happy endings. But it gave me you. And you, baby girl, you are worth every single thing I lost." Zora hung up and stared at the ceiling until dawn. 48 hours until she destroyed her father's empire. But for the first time since landing in Atlanta, she was not sure if revenge would feel like victory, or just another kind of loss. The night before she ended his world, she discovered that even enemies can become something unexpected, and that the people closest to you can become strangers in an instant. Julian's text arrived at noon. Confused, hurt, asking what he had done wrong, asking why she had disappeared without explanation. Zora stared at the message for a long time. This man, this sweet, wounded man who had shared his pain with her over coffee, was her brother. Half of his blood was her blood, and he had no idea. She owed him something. Not the truth, that was not hers to give, not yet. But at least an ending that was not cruelty. They met at a rooftop bar overlooking the city. The same city their father had shaped. The same city that held secrets neither of them fully understood. The rooftop bar overlooked Atlanta like a judgment seat, city lights sprawling beneath them in every direction. Julian sat across from Zora with wounded eyes, searching her face for an explanation she could not give. "I thought we had something," Julian said. "A connection. Was I wrong?" You were not wrong. Zora chose her words carefully. The connection was real, but it cannot go anywhere. There are things about my situation, about who I am, that make any kind of relationship impossible. What things? What are you not telling me? Have you ever had to walk away from something or someone that felt right but was not meant to be? That connection you knew you had to release? Tell me about it in the comments. Zora wanted to tell him, wanted to end the confusion in his eyes with the truth. But some truths are too sharp to speak aloud. They can only be carried in silence. I cannot explain, she said. Not yet, maybe not ever. But I need you to trust that walking away is the right thing. For both of us. Julian's jaw tightened. That is not fair. No, it is not. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Julian stood, dropping money on the table. I hope whatever you are running from is worth it, he said, because you are leaving something real behind. He walked away, and Zora let him go, carrying the weight of what she could not say. Later that night, Elijah found her on the hotel balcony, the city spread out below them, indifferent to the wars being fought in its towers. You told Julian, he said. Not a question. I told him nothing, just that it could not continue. Does he know why? No, and he cannot. Not until I decide what to do about Marcus. Elijah stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. You do not have to do this alone. She turned to face him, and for a moment, the space between them disappeared. 3 years of restraint and professionalism and carefully maintained distance suddenly felt very thin. I know, she whispered. That is what scares me. Before either of them could move, her phone rang. It was Marcus's assistant, and the news made Zora's blood freeze. Mr. Whitfield is holding a press conference tomorrow morning. He is stepping down as CEO and transferring controlling interest in Whitfield Enterprises to... The assistant paused. To you, Ms. Carter. He is giving you the company. He is giving you everything. Zora gripped the phone, her carefully constructed plan crumbling. She came to take. He was choosing to give. And somehow, that made everything more complicated. He built an empire to prove he mattered. He gave it away to prove that she mattered more. The press conference began at 9 in the morning. Every major business outlet had sent cameras. Rumors had been circulating since midnight. Marcus Whitfield stepping down, some unknown woman taking control. But nobody knew the full story. Nobody except Zora, who watched from her hotel room, unable to look away. The press conference cameras flashed like lightning as Marcus Whitfield announced the end of his reign. His voice was steady, his posture straight. But those who knew him saw something new in his eyes. Not defeat, but release. Whitfield Enterprises has been my family's legacy for 3 generations, Marcus said into the microphones. But legacy means nothing if it is built on the wrong foundation. I have made mistakes in my life. Mistakes that cost me things more valuable than any company. Today, I am trying to begin making amends. He announced the transfer of his controlling shares to Zora Carter. He called her a visionary, a leader, the future of ethical real estate development. He did not say she was his daughter, but he did not have to. The look in his eyes when he spoke her name said everything. When someone who hurt you finally takes accountability, not with excuses but with action, does it change anything? Can restitution ever balance the scales? Tell me your thoughts below. Zora watched the screen with tears streaming down her face. She did not understand why she was crying. She should feel victorious. She should feel satisfied. This was everything she came for, handed to her without a fight. But it did not feel like winning. It felt like grief. The empire his family built over 3 generations, handed to a woman the business world barely knew. What they did not know was simpler and more devastating. A father was finally giving his daughter what he should have given 20 years ago. A place, a legacy, a proof that she mattered. After the press conference, a courier arrived at her hotel room. A handwritten letter from Marcus. Inside was a photograph she had never seen. Denise, pregnant, glowing, standing in a courtyard surrounded by jasmine. Her hand rested on her stomach. Her smile was radiant with hope. Marcus's letter read, "I took this the week before I lost you both." She was talking about what kind of mother she would be. I knew then that I did not deserve either of you. I know it still. But I hope this company can be the beginning of what I owed and could never repay. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am asking for the chance to prove I can be better than the man I was. Whatever you decide, know this. You are the best thing I ever helped create. And letting you go was the worst mistake of my life. Zora read the letter with Elijah beside her. He held her hand through the silence that followed. Their intimacy was quiet. Profound, not physical but present. 2 people sharing weight. Zora read the letter 3 times. Then she picked up her phone and dialed a number she never thought she would call. Marcus answered on the first ring, his voice raw. "Zora, I do not forgive you," she said. "I am not sure I ever will. I know. But I think my mother deserves to hear what you told me. I think she deserves to see you try to be the man she believed you could be." The line went silent. Then Marcus spoke, barely a whisper. "Will she see me?" Zora looked at the photograph of her pregnant mother, frozen in a moment before everything shattered. "Come to Chicago," she said. "Come meet the woman you should have fought for. And maybe, we can figure out what happens next." 20 years after he let her go, Marcus Whitfield stood on a Chicago doorstep. Heart pounding, waiting to face the only woman who ever saw who he really was, and loved him anyway. The flight from Atlanta to Chicago took 2 hours. To Marcus, it felt like 20 years compressed into a single held breath. Zora met him at the airport. They did not hug, did not shake hands. Simply walked side by side to her car, the silence between them heavy, but not hostile. "She agreed to see you," Zora said as she drove. "But she has conditions." "Anything. Harold will be there. Her partner. She wants you to meet him." Marcus nodded. He had no right to jealousy. No right to anything except gratitude that Denise was willing to open her door at all. The brownstone looked exactly like he had imagined during all those years of wondering. Warm brick, window boxes with flowers. A home built by a woman who knew how to create beauty from nothing. Zora walked up the steps first. Marcus followed, his heart hammering so hard he could feel it in his throat. The door opened. Denise opened the door, and time collapsed. 20 years dissolved in the space between heartbeats. She was older now, lines around her eyes that had not been there when he loved her. Silver threading through the hair he used to bury his face in. But her eyes were exactly the same. And when she looked at him, Marcus felt everything he had spent 2 decades running from finally catch up. Not as punishment, as possibility. "Denise," he said, just her name. Nothing else would come. She studied him for a long moment, taking in the gray in his hair, the weight he carried in his shoulders, the man he had become in her absence. "You look tired," she said finally. "I am," Marcus admitted. "I have been tired for 20 years. Some stories do not end with perfect reconciliation. Some end with open doors and careful steps forward. What do you think? Is that enough? Is a chance at healing worth more than a guarantee of happiness? Tell me in the comments what you believe redemption really looks like. She stepped aside and let him in. The conversation that followed was not easy. Harold sat beside Denise, a quiet presence that Marcus respected. Zora watched from across the room, ready to intervene if needed. Marcus told Denise everything he had told their daughter. The weakness, the fear, the cowardice that had cost him everything that mattered. Denise listened without interruption. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "I spent a lot of years hating you," she said finally. "Then I spent a lot of years trying to forget you. Neither worked very well." She glanced at Harold, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "I cannot give you back what we lost, but I can give you a chance to be part of what we have now, for Zora's sake, and maybe for mine." It was not forgiveness. It was not reconciliation. But it was a door, cracked open just enough to let light through. 6 months later, the ribbon-cutting ceremony for Carter Whitfield Enterprises drew cameras from every network in the country. The merger of 2 companies, the fusion of 2 legacies, the beginning of something new. Zora stood at the podium, Elijah beside her. Somewhere in the past 6 months, the tension between them had finally broken. A kiss that was not stolen, but chosen. An acknowledgement of what had been building for 3 years. "I have been waiting," he had said. "I know," she replied. "I needed to become someone who could let you in." In the crowd, Marcus stood near Denise and Harold. Not together, not apart, just present in the same space, without pretense or pain. She came to Atlanta to destroy the man who abandoned her. Instead, she discovered that revenge and healing cannot live in the same heart, and that sometimes the greatest victory is choosing to build instead of burn. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear that our parents' choices do not have to define our futures. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in Zora's position? Would you have taken the company or walked away? And remember, legacy is not what we inherit. It is what we choose to leave behind. The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew cameras from every network in the country. But the photograph that went viral was simpler. 3 people standing together in the Chicago sunlight. A mother, a father, and the daughter who brought them back from the wreckage. Not a family. Not yet. But something that might become one, given enough time and grace. Some forevers start with forgiveness. Theirs started with a single word, spoken by Denise as Marcus stepped through her door for the first time in 20 years. Finally,